Are you serious? Are you serious? It looks like the propaganda machines are really, really in full mode now between the United States and Russia. Now, President Trump has already said that if there's any chemical weapons used, he will bring down the house. Okay, he'll bring hell and fury upon President Assad and the Russians and the Iranians if this happens. Russia's already saying, look, we're not going to do this. Assad's not going to do this. But Russia's accusing the United States or their allies of maybe doing a staged or a false flag, actually doing a false flag and then blaming the Russians or blaming Assad or blaming the Iranians. And matter of fact, there's an article just came out where Russia's saying that the stage filming of a false flag chemical attack is already going on, according to the Russian Ministry of Defense. Russian state media channels are in a near simultaneous blitz of information have issued breaking alerts this morning that anti-Assad insurgents in Idlib have begun filming fake footage of chemical attacks based on Russian Ministry of Defense statements. The Russian Center for Syrian Reconciliation says the fake footage of chemical attacks is expected to be delivered to various TV channels and Western journalists before the end of the day today. All right. Now, I've seen some of the pictures, some of the actual pictures that they say they're using in this fake attack. You have to, again, we've got so much propaganda going back and forth both ways. The United States propaganda machines are spinning, so are the Russians. Okay, there's no doubt about that. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that the Americans don't do it as well. And so what I'm trying to tell you is, why is there so much interest in the town of Idlib and Idlib Province? Now, the province is about 3 million people. The town itself is about 190,000 people. That's got some Al-Qaeda, about 10,000 Al-Qaeda troops in there or fighters, probably about 10,000 ISIS or rebels. And why is Russia wanting this province so bad? Well, partly because that area is about 50% Shiite, 50% Sunni. And the Russians do want to control it by driving out all the Sunnis. Now, you have to understand, Assad is a Shiite. The Iranians are Shiites. I'm talking about the Iranian regime, not necessarily the Iranian people. But the Iranian regime is Shiites. Assad is a Shiite. The Hezbollah are Shiites. And so there's this push against the Sunnis. Now, Saudi Arabia is Sunnis. And so you see the tension everywhere here. So this situation developing is Russian channel Russia Today, RT Today, also featured charges in breaking news describing several Middle East TV channels and a local branch of leading U.S. news channels have been sent to the city there of Idlib province to produce the footage. That's what Russia Today is saying, is that the Western journalists are already going there to stage or to get the footage of what they call going to be a false flag or fake chemical attack and blame it on the Russians or blame it on Assad or some of Assad's proxies, maybe even the Iranians. Okay? Now that's what Russia's saying. What's the United States saying? Well, the United States media is saying this. They're saying that the Russians threaten to attack U.S. troops supporting the Syrian rebels. And I did an entire show last night, and I read these reports, how the United States has rushed reinforcements to its Syrian base after Moscow threatened to attack them, alleging they are harboring terrorists. And Moscow has threatened the United States with direct assaults on its troops. The Marines, about 100 Marines that were in Syria, there in the Iraqi, Jordan, and Syria border right there in what's called the it's a neutral zone, if you will. It's called an exclusion zone. It's a 55-kilometer exclusion zone. There's a little bitty facility in there, a little outpost in there called At Tanf, and it's less than 20 kilometers from the Jordanian border. There's Americans there. There's some of the locals, rebels in the area that we train there. There's Jordanian troops there, and I think others. Okay, but certainly the U.S. Marines. Now, the United States heard that received this threat from Russia, so we sent an additional 100 U.S. Marine troops there to protect the facility. But Putin is accusing the United States of protecting terrorists and is threatening to come in and attack the outpost. The United States is saying to the Kremlin, you better not do this, because then you're going to break the rules of engagement, and then we will respond brutally from air, land, and sea. Now, the Pentagon show little sign of backing down, though they have been given direct threats and orders, basically, from the Kremlin. Okay, so now that's what news media on the American side is saying. All right, and then meanwhile, we have another report. And that's coming out of Israel, Debka File. And that headline this morning says, Putin's ready to go all the way against the United States in Syria. Where does this place Israel? Okay. And then, so because that's another component to all of this. Well, the Russian-Syrian success in the high-stakes Idlib offensive would give Iran a major victory and renewed footing in Syria. This would torpedo the U.S.-Israeli campaign to drive the Iranians out of Syria. After a series of aerial bombardments, the Russian-Syrian-Iranian offensive to gain control of Idlib, the last rebel stronghold in Syria, is ready to go, having meanwhile gained the valuable advantage over the Hezbollah fighters. After returning home from the Syrian battlefields, Lebanese Shiite fighters were given fresh orders over the weekend to return to the province of Idlib and Hama. Last month, U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton spent 4 days in Israel, mapping out with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli generals a joint military strategy for destroying the Iranian military presence in Syria. However, full Russian-Iranian partnership for the Idlib operation injects a new factor into the equation. Its success would consolidate Iran's grip on the country with solid Russian support. The stakes in Idlib is so high that for the past 2 weeks, the United States and the Russians have been massing large-scale naval and aerial might in the eastern Mediterranean, opposite Syria and the Persian Gulf waters. And British and French forces in the region are on high alert in case they are called on as backup for potential U.S. military move in Syria. Moscow last week warned that for any attack by the 3 Western allies on Iranian or, quote, Syrian forces taking part in the Idlib offensive, Russia would hit back at pro-American targets in eastern and northern Syria in the line of Russian fire. Therefore, are the Syrian Kurdish militants. All right, here we go. In other words, Russia saying to the United States, saying the United States, the British, and the French, if you hit Iran or Syrian troops, I will hit, Russia saying we will hit the Kurds, all right, which President Trump has said he will not tolerate the Kurds being taken out. Neither will he allow Israel to be defeated. So U.S. forces in eastern Syria were placed on standby as a signal to Moscow that attacks on the Kurds would encounter U.S. military action immediately. And as a matter of fact, Saturday, on September 8th, as these tensions peaked General Joseph Dunford, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, briefed President Donald Trump on his operational plans in Syria. In Israel, where the general public was not advised of this hazardous situation while ushering in the New Year festival, most people were not aware that a major conflagration was at hand in Syria, or that it could draw their armed forces into battle. We're talking Israelis now. As things stand, there's a real likelihood that the United States, the United Kingdom, and the French, and the Israelis may be going to intervene against the Russians, the Iranians, and the Syrians. What? With Turkey standing by. Folks, you're talking about almost a world war here. This is a dangerous situation, and most people don't even know what's happening on this 9/11. 9/11. Anything could happen today. Okay? And of course, our hearts and prayers go out to all of those members of the families of nearly 3,000 Americans that died on 9/11. It's a tragedy that we'll never forget. But at the same time, we have serious problems taking place in the Middle East and with these hurricanes. It's all happening on this day, 9/11. Don't miss today's live broadcast. We'll get you up to speed on all of these critical issues at 12 noon Eastern at my website at www.paulbegleyprophecy.com. Are you serious? Are you serious? Are you saved?